Is
No,
this stuffed animal? Black lab?
no, that's we got two golden doodles. So that's Rigsby and that's Dolly.
Rixby and Dolly.
Rigby's having a good nap.
Yeah. Now she's three-quarter doodle, golden doodle, because she's like a half golden doodle bred back onto a poodle, and she's older than him. And
Wow. I grew up with black labs. We live on a cattle farm, and I would get lost in the woods my entire childhood, kind of going off into the mountains. And I had my trusty, my first dog was Boomer, and he
mhm.
was a black lab. He was a really smart dog, so I called him Boomer. And then, after Boomer got old and passed, we had Zach, and he was very fast. And, and also I had a knack for getting lost in the woods and new dogs showing up. So I had a few dogs that disappeared out of the trees, like Bing, that I call Bing because I thought bingo was cliche. So Bing was really original. So that was good. And we had Doofus, who was the dumbest dog I ever had. He was a little small little thing, but he lived the longest. So I haven't figured that out. He lived forever, like 15 or so years, but was not very smart.
Well, that says something, though, doesn't it? I mean,
Yes, it
sometimes I
does.
think, man, sometimes I'm super like I have an envy. Well, twofold idiotic on my behalf. Part of it is I think I know things,
Hmm.
and then the second thing is sometimes I'm envious of the guy that I find to be really simple,
Yep.
and then I'm like, well, would I really want to be simple? And then it depends, you know. Like sometimes I like the gift of being able to ponder different things, and then other times I'm like, oh man, like they're some of the most peaceful and wise dudes I know are just very simple.
Yep.
And but I don't know how to, like, it's not like something I can just do, right? Like so we all have our burdens, I guess.
I I actually think that's a really profound question and actually a huge deal. Because it is extremely problematic to moralize not being simple. Like, oh, look at those simpletons who don't read Aquinas, who don't read those things. That's really, really bad. But then there's also a problem in moralizing reading theology and having ideas where you say that's bad, right? Because if you really believed in God, you wouldn't need to be thinking these ideas. You could have a simple faith, right? So I always like how Rick Joyner kind of talks about there being a ditch on both sides of the road, right? Like there's this
Yep.
kind of moralization of simplicity at the expense of thought, but then a moralization of thought at the expense of simplicity. I'll just as a quick note, that's where my beloved, without going on a long talk about it, because that's always something I can find myself doing. But I really, really like David Hume, and I think David Hume is radically misread. And David Hume is thinking that very, very problem, because he's trying to defend common life. And he thinks people have philosophy and they come in and ruin people's common life. Like they come in with these ideas of the good, and you have the simple blacksmith, and you then say, I'm going to control the blacksmith with the divine rights of kings or something that the Pope said, or whatever. And so a lot of his effort to quote unquote deconstruct philosophy, is all of that is actually in order to protect people in their common life. Because he wants to bind, not, when he deconstructs the idea of ethics on he's trying to say ethics needs to be based on people's immediate suchness, their common life, right?
Mhm.
That what people determine they ought to live, you have to be there to know. If you're some king 100 miles away and you have an idea of what the peasants ought to do based on what you think they are, then you think you can come in there with power and manipulate them. And so David Hume is trying to kind of stop that. So he's caught in this tension between how do you have ideas serve people in their simplicity while also being aware that sometimes without ideas you can be manipulated. Like, how do you use thinking in service of a common life? I think is a massive thing. Mark.
You might like my recent Substack article. I'm new to Substack. I've written like 4 articles. The last one is me scratching my head on what law actually is, and I think it's I think it's ultimately an agreement between two parties. And my question, and I didn't answer my question. I exhausted it, and I asked everyone to come in and give me their opinions, and nobody did. But the big question I have is, who is agreeing? Did I agree to this? I don't think I agreed to this. Can I offer a word of advice though? Don't mention the word boomer in front of Michael, you'll trigger him. That was a joke.
Well, so there's
I
something
love
that
the
you
boomers. I love the boomers more the most.
something that Daniel kicked off in my thinking was when we were talking about complex thinkers or simpletons. Like there are these different degrees of it, right? Because like I've never read Hume, or I've very little Aquinas. I mean, like the level of complexity I'm more into is like maybe more contemporary artists, like whether it's music or or literature or whatever, or so I guess like the most simple guys are the guys that are like none of these things seem to really they're just kind of like like I don't really care about whatever, like I don't really have a whole lot of thought about the Super Bowl or Forrest Gump or Aquinas. I just like to spend time with my people. Like that's a kind of simple thinking that I wish I had more of. I think those guys are probably better friends. They probably have the capacity to be better friends than myself, because I have a tendency to be a little more self-centered, and I think my self-centeredness is kind of like rooted in like a seriousness, rather than a humor. Because when I'm willing to take myself not so seriously, that's when I'm less self-centered and I think more generous to those around me. All these different kinds of things. So, but one of the things I wanted to talk with you about quick was the quote that's been tossed around where it talks about where you talk about people not picking up the guitar because they don't feel they can make a living out of it. And this is something that I've thought about many times over the last several years. Like my wife and I, we have this thing that we like to do where we agree on a writing prompt, and then we go off and write our own little stories, and then we come back and we share that story, and then or just different things like that. And then one of the things out of
That sounds healthy.
Yeah, so out of that, I've asked other people, like, if do you like to write? And they'll often say, no, I'm not good at it. And it's like, well, I mean, why do you have to be good at it? Like, like, why do you have to? Do you like how it makes you feel when you're creative?
Is there anybody in there?
I think that this is the kind of antidote to the AI problem, which is, why are we reliant upon what the AI, like, why I'm not worried. My biggest worry about AI is us feeling like all creations are about an outcome. So like I'm not worried about a final draft or of something, like I'm interested in the interaction that of these God-given gifts of being able to interact with creativity, so I love getting a prompt. So like when I get a prompt, I have an image in my head already of like a story, almost the whole thing. And I like being able to be kind of like the stenographer for whatever that creative energy is. And that to me is a tremendously powerful gift, and it's cathartic, and it has nothing to do with whether I'm a good writer or not, and or if I can get paid from it.
Exactly.
And so that's, I think this is a valuable thing that somehow people like can maybe talk more about, or even just like as a practice, I guess. Like I don't even know what that would be. Is that some sort of epistemological understanding? I don't know. You know.
Well, first, that is awesome. Second, I should note also when I say simple and complex, all languages are very problematic because the guy who's read Plato, they can't go out and fix a tractor like the grandfather has who's never read Plato, right? So it all depends on your scope. That's like that's something like a Soul or a Hike would kind of point out. Like when we talk about being mentally complex, well, what are we talking about? Like it's always kind of scope based and specialization, right? The question I think we're wondering is, as we're kind of drowning in information, is there a particular value or capacity or skill that a certain sort of abstract knowledge capacity affords you that's worth the melancholia? And that's kind of like what a human is like, is it worth it? Now that's a huge question and really, really important. Second to what you were saying, first, one of the reasons like you even just sharing that or talking about that online right here live is a big deal is because we need people basically to give others permission to do that. Like one of the reasons I'm really bullish about these kind of spaces is I think there are tons of people. Like I think there are a lot of people who basically feel as if they don't have permission to do that. Well, no one else is doing it and I'm just alone. And then people don't bring it up because they don't know how the people they talk to in their neighborhood will react. And so they keep it quiet and then, and so on. So people they don't have models in their life where it's even okay to do that sort of thing, right? Mm-hmm. And the same way that I think having these conversations recorded online is a big deal because it kind of gives people permission to basically say, oh, I can have these kind of conversations, even if I'm not in academia, even if I don't have all the answers, I can actually explore ideas, even if I don't know the answers. That's a kind of permission structure and modeling it. Like we have a way to model social relations now in a manner that I just think about like maybe in like 50 years ago, I got lucky. Like I gotta say, I got real lucky that I just happened when I was 8 to go into that diner where the old guys were sitting and talking, Mr. Dillard, Mr. Chapman, Mr. Fergus, they just sitting and having kind of conversations like this. And I encountered it and therefore saw it was possible. And they also were kind and let me sit with them, right? I'm like, wow, if I wouldn't have gotten that luck, who knows, right? And I should also just clarify, I'm not saying, so it's always difficult when you talk about systems because it's always pluses and minuses. There is no good system, bad system. It's always trade-offs. I always like how Martha Nussbaum talks about it. It's always a trade-off between this here and there. Capitalism, if you base it on the great enrichment, is an explosion of creativity in the Dutch Empire that then turns in a mechanical direction. Why does it do that? Is it all bad? Absolutely not. It would be an extensive discussion. So this isn't to say, oh, the system demonizes creativity, but there's something, and you could argue it unleashes creativity on certain circumstances, but there's something that can also occur where there's basically a sort of feeling that unless I'm good at it, unless I have a job at it, unless I have because that whole idea of like, I'm a bad writer. There's a way in which that's a language of, well, I'm not good at coding, so I'm not going to be a coder. I'm not good at law, so I'm not going to be a lawyer. Like that kind of speech is like, I'm not good at something, therefore I don't do it, is kind of an occupational language, right? You don't do something you're not going to get paid for, right? So there's this idea that, why would I do something I'm not good at, right? Well, because it kind of makes you fully human. And I was speaking with Michael, I was speaking with Michael about how there's all these characters in literature and life who, because they do that which doesn't make sense, they find the Holy Grail. Because they do that which doesn't make sense, they actually are able to come into a certain fullness that if all the people who are neurotypical, quote unquote, rational had to say, you would never do that thing, right? And therefore never find the Holy Grail. So it's actually really important that there are people who are writing, even if they're quote unquote not good at it, because there's a possibility there that to get, you'd have to do, and then it comes forth. But the likelihood of people doing it often is tied to if they encountered some old men in big T doing it when they were young. And there are people in the nation that because of their background, because of their experiences, whatever it is, they actually are writing poetry, even if they're not getting paid for it. But they're not easily seen. Like I was able to see those old men in the diner. But by doing it online, by talking about it online, you're increasing the chances that people see it modeled and have permission, and who knows what that might do. So I just think it's really important what you're saying there, Chad.
And I love the way that it, especially poetry is kind of like one of those things for me where it's a kind of like an arena that I get to kind of work out questions that I can't really articulate otherwise. And so like I can trip over questions and things like this. I have this other thought that I have about this, maybe a little bit of a quick little tangent, but I've had this idea about this implicit neo-iconoclastic move where we're going to kind of, I know that sounds like a bunch of sophistry, but this idea of the written word or particularly the written word is kind of like being under iconoclastic threat. Like these are the icons of our age, like the holy symbols of our age are words. Like if you just go to any public school, you have like ABC, you have pictures of these, alphabets everywhere. You have, and it became so important. And I think that there was so much value poured into education and these different kinds of things where there was kind of like a rebellious, there's been like a rebellious streak against it. Now, like, like literacy is down like 36% or something, and like everything's an acronym now. So you have OMG or whatever. You have like kind of like the deconstruction of words themselves. And so there's like this interesting iconoclasm around the symbol of words and letters themselves. So the icon of the word is being destroyed, and now like this other image is kind of being re-elevated, which is like what we're doing right now. And so I think there has to be kind of like a conscious striving to be to express those creative gifts that we have that my dog doesn't have. And that's very important, I think. Now I don't get to read. I don't read a lot of poetry because it doesn't really do something for me. But I love when my wife reads poetry for me. Like I love that, and I love music, so I love lyrics a lot. And I find I'm the kind of person that can like map meaning deep into a song that might not even be there. So possibly a little schizophrenic, but I love these kinds of things because
You and me both, Chad.
like I mean, there's so much depth to this stuff that, So I'm maybe a little bit the opposite of nihilism. So I don't believe in nihilism. I think nihilism is a lie. It's impossible. And in fact, I think it's the opposite, that everything actually matters versus nothing matters. So I don't know. That's all I got to say about that. But what do you think about this the iconoclasm of the symbolic, the word itself as a symbol or something like that? I don't know if I'm clear on that.
I think you're really clear, and that's really important. And Olson, good to see you. And I don't mean to keep jumping in. It's just, Chad, you're bringing up so many fantastic things, and I have to take my oldest to basketball in a few minutes. But first off, I.A. Richards has a wonderful thought experiment where he says, so he had 3 groups in a class. And one of them, he said, okay, here's your prompt. Education is like a river. Next one, education is like a city. Third one, education is like a tree. And they went off and they came back. And the point he makes is that the very educational philosophy that these groups came up with was totally inseparable and relative to the metaphor they started with, right? That once they had the metaphor, because he never told them, here's the key. He said, he never tells them that they must make the educational philosophy follow the metaphor. He just said, you just have to use this line at some point. That's all. And yet they could not help but then actually have their very philosophy respect the metaphor. One of the reasons why poetry is so important is because if you don't have this ability to break out of language, to make it fuller and then recreate it, you're going to be captured in a metaphoric structure and not even know it, right? And I think also, to me, we're seeing the death of the word as a definition in favor of the word as pointing to an experience and a flow. And that's always, I think, what language was. We came to think that language were definitions, right? With someone like a Derrida and a Wittgenstein are like, can't happen. I'm quite a fan of Sol Kripke, which basically is like, when I say the word donkey, you don't think of a definition, you remember an experience. That's why it's intelligible to you, right? And so words have for too long been in this idolatry of a stable state identity, which for Owen Barfield is an idolatry. And now we're saying, can we return to the flow of language that actually we participate in to give meaning? Poetry helps you move from language's definitions to language's flow. That's why you need to practice it. Conversations like this help you move from language as definition to flow. And if language, as many like people say, if language fundamentally structures us as persons, then the way we use language determines the way that we are people in the world. So I think basically the idolatry, what we're at, and then I'll stop. What we're at is we're seeing the failure of language as pure information. So people are like, forget it. I'm just going to use, little symbols or whatever, right? And you look at that and you say, that's the death of language. But in a positive light, it's a rebellion against language as information that suggests a contingent possibility of people being hungry for language as flow, relationality, and personhood, if people are there to model that alternative. But if they're not there to model that alternative, then people's rebellion against language will just end up in further isolation as opposed to blossoming into a fuller potentiality.
Where it gets squirrely is around the law, though. So that's where the iconoclasm of the word, of written language, gets really scary, because you can't make the law. You can't
right.
You can't document the law with emojis. I mean, not really well, I don't think. So, yeah.
No, that's exactly right. And what I would say is one of the reasons why, and I'll stop, most of the time when we see a failure of something, our temptation is to tear it down. And that leads to, quote unquote, the French Revolution, as Hannah Arendt talks about, right? As opposed to when we see an error, Hegel has this lovely line where he says the fear of error is the fear of truth. What that means is a certain sublation. It's not where you leave behind the written word, but you learn how not to be captured by it. You learn how to master it. And it turns out that the way you master the written word is actually to approach it as enabling these flows, right? Now, the exact question of law, I think, is a huge one and gets into like hike and stuff, but I'll stop.
Very good to meet you, Diane.
It's a pleasure.
We should do it again sometime.
Absolutely.
Sweet.
Olson, you got something to say? I haven't gotten to meet you yet either, so glad to have you here. Oh,
You're muted, Olson.
he unmuted, but we can't hear you.
StreamYard's been weird lately, man. Like, if I get on a stream with a lot of people, like, all of a sudden I won't be able to hear, like where I could hear, Michael before. Now all of a sudden I can't hear Michael. What's up with that, StreamYard? So, it's been kind of weird. But then, there's been a couple of people I blocked too, like their YouTube, where I don't want them. I don't want to interact with them on YouTube. And I wonder if I go into StreamYard, if it carries over there too. I don't know, because I don't know who actually owns StreamYard. If Google does, or I don't know. Somebody does.
I think it's a random duck. It's a random duck.
Ben Affleck owns StreamYard. Is there a place we can find your literature?
OG wrote, all of the books on the YouTube have read and audio versions are on Amazon. You're very kind. Substack, I need to read Mark's piece because I think this question of law is a freaking huge one. Yeah, we do short stories as well under the wing. We started in creative fiction, so we have novels that need to get off my laptop and into the world. OG Rose, it means Opperman Garner Rose. It's funny when we picked that, we had no idea about original gangster. So everyone's like, what? It just meant Opperman Garner or Argod Rose based on our names together. But Amazon, ogrose.com. Like I said, I would just go to the YouTube, and a lot of the books have the entire thing has been read just to get a kind of flavor of different stuff. But thank you.
Yeah, nice. No, I'd like to check them out. because when I'm not listening to podcasts, I need fiction. Like I need it because otherwise, all this sometimes the thinky talky can be like just too much. It's like, can I just get some bullshit fiction into my ears a little bit? You know, like I've heard, how many times can I listen to, whatever record, Dark Side of the Moon? How many times can I listen to Dark Side of the Moon? Like, great record, but like I need to hear like, some good fiction too. So yeah.
I also want to note that I think I'll stop. We are in the age, I think, where the relationship between philosophy and art, coming to really understand that, I think, is now basically necessary. We've gone through a phase where like philosophy hates literature, literature hates philosophy, and this has not been good. They need to be thought together. I mentioned earlier Zane Zwingli, a number of modern counter Enlightenment thinkers, as I like to talk about. It's all about that. And I think also, I think also fiction is an epistemology. Like the ability to write poetry and to write fiction is a way of thinking. It isn't in anything. It's this weird blend. And also, it's this weird blend between anything goes and no, if anything goes, it sucks. Like there actually are rules, but the rules are, here's the key phrase, interrelating with the Gestalt. What a mouthful. It's the logic is interrelating. As the creation occurs, the probability distribution of what you can do shrinks, but it's not anything goes. And yet it also is creative. And I actually think from the standpoint of the artist, you can start making sense of stuff like free will versus determinism, agent versus God, because in the creative act, you experience the bothness that gets close to things. So yes.
Wilson, try it again.
Wilson.
Try it again. Am I there?
Hey, we can hear you. It's working.
Yeah.
Good.
I did a stream with a friend earlier today. We were doing math, and I was trying to get it so my phone, I could use my phone as the camera to do the math problems, but it wasn't working. It was like reverberating, so I was changing all the settings, and I forgot to change them back. So, anyways,
Yes.
so I guess part of that discussion, I just want to I have like a whole list of things I'd like to clarify with Daniel, but I won't get into all of them now. But just kind of one fundamental, are in your arguments, and I heard you do like the earlier Lovecraft conversation on economics. I was listening to that one. Do you start from the premise that fundamentally we are economic? Like why, like your guitar analogy, are we fundamentally economic creatures and we make those decisions based off the economics? Or because I feel like we make some assumptions, like that's kind of a foundational axiom you kind of use and for some of your arguments. So I don't know. That's my question initially.
That is an outstanding question. And of course, it would depend on what you mean by econ, et cetera, so forth or so on. I put a whole stock on human beings being like very innately creative. Like we are incredibly creative, like to a radical degree. Like that's why you see children are very, very creative and so on and so forth. So then so there's a bunch of things. So first off, you then have the socialization problem, right? Because if you have raw, untrained creativity, then laundry doesn't get done, food isn't on the table, and you have trouble, right? So you have this socialization mechanism that can occur, right? Olson, please.
Sorry. I do not. So I think how are you defining creativity here? Because I would argue that doing laundry could be a creative and artistic pursuit.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
So I don't necessarily think it would not get done. So it kind of depends on how you would define creativity.
Yes, I completely agree. So you have a creativity that can be trained. And then actually when you get what I would call the Hegel, and I don't mean to throw out a bunch of terms, so please jump in. So when we talk about like sublation, which is this German word for Aufgang that you'll see in people like the German idealists, there's this idea of something new that brings with it the old and gives it a new quality. And so like you say, I would say, yeah, absolutely. The name of the game is to learn actually how to have creativity and a certain fuller participation in the laundry, The argument is that it does not come naturally. Like it has to be earned. It has to be worked on. Because when you first say do the laundry, the natural thing is to be like, I don't like doing this, or I don't want to do this, or any sort of hard thing, right? Like you can kind of start off with the creativity that's just pure expression and it's not bound by rules or anything. Because once you actually play the game of reading, my beloved Robert Olson Butler, and you go, oh my gosh, this is what you have to do to write a good fiction sentence. That's really hard. I don't want to do that. But actually, if you submit yourself under that craft, then the creativity that you have that drive for can actually be brought into its own fullness, right? So you kind of go through the thing, right? And so what ends up happening is you need, and all of this, I'm happy to expand on. I hate to be so rude. I do have to take my son to his basketball game, but this is an excellent question. So what I would say is you have a raw creativity that precisely can be sublated into a creativity that actually can structure and design, right? That it can actually build things and you can actually have a deeper participation, say in the laundry. We'll speak at the net between like this idea of actually it's one thing to have a mystical experience. It's another thing to actually then not run from the society in your mysticism, but actually learn to actually take it back into the people, back to the common life, back to the laundry. So there's a process of learning to hone those things, or like socialization. The problem can be we tend to get lost in the socialization. Like we start with a creativity, and then when we go into the socialization, we're learning to train it, we then forget the creativity. We get out of the habit of doing it. Or we begin saying, well, that's when I was younger and I don't do that anymore. Or we even kind of get out of the ability to think it because we say get captured in sort of a metaphorical construct like we were talking about with Chad. And since we don't do practices like poetry or different things, we get captured and don't even realize we're captured. But then there's also the problem where the even realization of that thought can kind of be cut out by the process of Olson, please.
So there is a logic to that train of thought, but is that train determinist, right? Like, is that for everybody? Because I think like if we're learning mastery in most skills, and you're wanting to be creative, there's a process that needs to happen to go through that sometimes isn't fun, right? But it's in with the mindset of becoming better at it. Once you've reached a certain level of mastery, then you then get to your creativity encounters it. Now, for a lot of people, for good pedagogy, they're integrating that funness aspect throughout the whole process of learning to master something. And so I don't think it is necessary that we all have to leave the creativity behind in the process of that. Like, I do think it happens a lot, and I'm not so it does happen, and it's probably maybe even a majority of the time, but it's not necessarily all of the time.
I don't disagree at all. I'm not a determinist in any way whatsoever. I'll speak in kind of tendencies or orientations, or for example, I would say I think it is very difficult to basically resist the leaving your creativity behind. I think you actually very often, like I just think about had I not had various models or run into people that basically said, actually, it's okay to have like these discussions, or actually, no, you can write poetry even if you're not getting paid for it. I think that can have a big influence. So certainly I'm not a determinist. I basically think a lot of philosophical debates, like between free will and determinism, are actually, this is a giant claim, they're actually operating from an epistemology of things versus situations and relations. And as a result, you get into a lot of these kind of either ors that lead to a whole lot of trouble. So certainly, I don't want to say that there's a determination, but I do want to say that it is not given that you're going to maintain your creativity, that you actually have to like learn and work and like need those modeling. But I also think a funny thing that happens is as you actually engage in the hard work and you take those first few steps, you suddenly come to enjoy the difficulty, just like exercise, right? Like you hate running at a certain point, but then you get to the place where you look forward to running, right? And I also think of that in light of these weird mysteries when Jesus is like, you have to take up your cross, but the burden is light. Right? That doesn't seem to make much sense unless there's actually something about once you say, no, I can't do that. But once you take up the cross, you go, no, actually I can, right? Likewise, you come up with all these reasons not to do creativity, all these reasons not to do poetry. But then when you do it, you actually go, no, I can do it, actually. So I completely agree with all of that. Generally, I like to talk about, and I'm so sorry, I have to go. We'll have to do this again. I love your questions, Olson. They're outstanding. Is that a lot of the challenge is to move from being automatic, like a kind of automatic, to auto mastery. Like you want to move to the place where you actually get into a certain auto mastery that is on the other side of submitting yourself to a very organic, live, and human process. Now, all like the society wants you to be automatic. Like you go to a certain way, you just kind of step and you go from that. But that same society also allows resources to becoming automasters at, say, being a person. And I have to explain all this, just like the society gave us this, all talking and gathering, right? So it's a very big problem to say it's all good or all bad. And I am freezing like crazy because the wind is getting worse. But yes, gentlemen, Ben, I am sorry I didn't get to speak to you. It's good to see you. Olson, wonderful question. Mark, good to meet you. I'll read your Substack. You're muted, Mark.
I suspect I agree with you, but I need to spend some time understanding your language.
I know. I'm so sorry. I hate doing it. Yeah, please.
No, don't apologize. I have weird language for stuff, and it's fine.
No, it's
But
I guess,
yeah, I suspect I agree.
the thing that's so tricky, I guess, I will say, and Michael, thank you for hosting this. And one of the things that I find is so tricky is that this sounds very vague. The thing that is problematic is very similar to the thing that's the sublation. Like the automatic, robotic, just kind of going with the flow, not thinking, that can be the thoughtlessness of a Hannah Arendt that's very problematic, can also kind of be like the flow state, actually. When you're in the automastery and you give yourself over to something, and these very slight differences make a world of difference, and it's hard to kind of identify all of those things. Thank you all. You are all great. Ben, good to meet Olson, Mark, Michael, very good. I will go into the snowstorm.
Bless you,
now.
Daniel.
Good to see you. Bless you all. Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh.
Ben, what's going on?
Hey, this is your, I don't know how I got this. This is your stream, Michael?
Yes.
I feel like I've met you before.
Yes, you came on. Mark was there. He sang a song. Your daughter came on. It's a few months back, I think.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just, it's a blur. And so that guy is a philosopher?
Yeah, Daniel, him and his wife have written a bunch of books together, and they got a YouTube channel, and they host some of these kind of conversations and things. I don't think they live stream too much, but yeah, they're.
Is he a professor at UVA or something? I saw from his.
I think he is or was or whatever. His wife has been them. They both teach. Yeah.
Oh.
So, yeah. Yep.
Yeah, it's too bad. It's too bad because the internet tends to have trouble putting someone who has like nuanced philosophical positions in a I don't know what you call it, like a pigeonhole where everyone can, you know what I mean? Like ortho bros or people who defend evolution. He seems like more of a nuanced thinker.
Yes, he is definitely doesn't he writes long books about everything. So yeah, he tries to examine things from a lot of angles. So yeah, it's good.
I think a lot of what I was going to say to him was I have a master's in theology from a Catholic perspective. And a lot of times the language of the Bible, when I hear, especially on the internet, there's a real lack of understanding that we're interpreting, that it's a creative process. It's like this idea of like, what does it say and who is right and who is wrong in their interpretation. And I'm always like, and Catholics can engage in that just as much as Protestants, although it tends to be a more Protestant thing. But like, again, like the foundation of your being is supposedly these words. And words are more complicated than just like, this is what they say. It's more a living thing. I don't know if that's what he was getting at, but
Yeah, because we would talk about it too. Like, so so he has, I know it's like one of his more recent books. It was called the Map is Indestructible, and it's about this problem of like the map is not the territory, and how you get into these internally consistent, coherent worldviews where within that system everything makes sense, everything fits, and so if you're in that, then you can more or less communicate with other people who are in that same view the same way. But, and this is like the big problem with like most theological debates, you could have, somebody else is has a totally different worldview, which may also be internally consistent and coherent. Yeah. And then there's like words that, share that are across them, but they're relating to very different things within those different. So, if you talk about the church or God or whatever,
right. Totally different reference point. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what his one of his more recent books was on, and trying to find some ways to overcome that. And I think it is sort of like, figuring out how to have a little bit more of a return to a childlike openness.
Right.
And seeing.
Are you familiar with the movement called presuppositionalism?
Yes.
In theology? Yes. So presuppositionalism is interesting because it owns that it's doing that.
Yeah.
It owns that it's saying like, I can't really talk to anyone outside of my worldview, which then of course leads to the question, like, how do you compare worldviews? Or how do you get to what would lead you to one worldview or another? And I think it's an unsolvable problem. As Catholics generally don't do that. We would just say all people have certain things in common. I was just having a debate with someone about whether, like, the intuition that we exist, he was saying you need to justify that. I was saying it's an intuition. You can't justify a basic intuition. It's assumed in the Bible. The Bible doesn't get us anywhere with that. And that's true for all of us. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So it's interesting.
I think I can push back on this.
Yeah.
Sorry guys, I gotta go. My in-laws are coming over and I gotta get ready. Sorry.
See ya.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm talking the screen. Sorry. What was I going to say?
I was talking about these basic axioms or basic intuitions.
I've really lost me.
All right.
You were saying you were going to push back against my thing that like existence is an intuition.
Damn it! What was I going to say? It's gone. I'm sorry. It might come back.
Well, I was saying that the basic intuition that we exist. Someone was trying to ask me to justify that, and I was saying you can't.
That's what I was going to say. You're going to disagree with me on this, but if it allows you to predict the future, then there's something right about it. So if your intuition is that you exist and that allows you in some way to predict the future, then you're kind of on solid ground there.
Yeah. You mean that it works? It works.
Yeah, it's functional.
Yeah, I think that also is like what most children think. They're not going to question something. The kids don't question things that only adults question certain things. And if you ask a
Yeah.
kid about it,
Oh.
if you say to a kid, I have 6 kids, you know, I always find it funny to say to them, how do you know we're not dreaming right now? They'll indulge in it a little bit and then they'll go play. Cause it's like, they're just like,
What are
I
you
don't know.
talking about?
Yeah, right.
Well, that's the whole thing with like
What are you talking about?
the map and the territory. You know, because you need a map. You need a map. You need some basic thing to figure out what to do. You know, because otherwise, like, you know, you need something to give you some sort of direction. But you gotta realize that whatever that map is, or your worldview, it's not. It doesn't perfectly correlate to everything in reality, but it's got a gist that lets you move forward, and then you can figure out.
Well, can I push back against that? Why do you need a map? I'm not sure what you mean by a map, but like, why?
Well, I mean, it's just
Can I
okay.
ask
You can be nihilist and then just say like life has no meaning or whatever. But then it's just
Well,
whatever
I don't think the only alternative to like a map is nihilism.
Well, everybody has something that is motive. This is
Michael.
Everybody like is why are you doing whatever you're doing now? And I know that that's like the part of the presuppositional argument that people will like try to say basically like everything you do doesn't make sense because you haven't thought it through, which is one of the problems with like the pure presuppositionalism is that there is lots of stuff that we do for good reasons and that we don't do for, you know, like that we haven't maybe necessarily thought of. But that's like it's whatever your starting point is like how do you build any kind of philosophy or
I would say
kind of moral choice.
I would say Christianity. I have like a lot of Christians disagree with me about this. I don't think Christianity is a map. I think it's a relationship. I don't think a relationship is a map. I don't think it's like a map.
Well, it is.
I think map is the wrong word.
That's yes,
Please,
it's fine.
Michael.
We don't have to.
Depends
use
what you
the
mean by
word,
map,
but-
of course. I'm
Well,
not trying
that's
to
what I say.
lock you
So
in.
okay, it's something with like telos or whatever. You say,
Explored
okay,
territory is a much better way of looking at it.
What is it? What'd you say?
Explored territory.
Explored past
So
tense.
So as a kid, I grew up in rural England, and we would go off exploring, and then we go slightly further and slightly further.
Yeah.
So we would explore the territory, and we'd map it out in our own minds. But it wasn't like a written map; it was just an awareness of where we were and where we fitted into this.
You're saying it's like experiential. It's more
horizon.
experiential than written.
Yeah.
There was a
Much
very
better way of looking at it.
There was a very I forget the name of this book, but it was a really interesting book where a Western person went and spoke with Native Americans, trying to like figure out how, the different ways of thinking. They had no maps, but when this Western guy asked them to describe, and then he wrote it, it was like a perfect map. But they had never written it down. They didn't have any maps. So like what they were doing in their mind actually was perfectly correct, but it was all experiential, passed down through tradition and through experience. And I think it was fundamentally different what was going on with their map because it was internal, not external. But it was accurate.
So yeah,
super
map
accurate.
is just one analogy. Okay, one analogy of this whole thing that
Bless you,
do.
Chad.
And really, you know, and the point of it, but the point is the distinction between the map not being exactly the same as the territory. Because if you have a map that is that has 100% the same detail as the landscape, then it's actually like not useful at all. You've just duplicated the landscape,
Right.
and if you're stuck in the middle of the woods, it's not helpful at all. So it needs to be like, for one thing, it's got to be smaller than all of reality, so you can comprehend it and strip down, etc. But because of that, you know, it's never going to be perfect. So he has this thing, Daniel, in his thing where he talks about that. He talks about the girdle point with the Gödel's incompleteness
Can you
theorem
explain
or
that?
whatever.
'Cause I'm not-
You mean you
Okay.
leave out some details necessarily?
So there's something where it's like you cannot have, it's this whole, you know, the whole mathematical thing of like his incompleteness theorem. I'm not a mathematician, so I won't explain it, but I can explain it in other ways. One of the examples that I like, that I think is that I just shared the other day, is like, so when Jesus is teaching, you know, if you hear a sermon, it may tend to be on like one parable, but when Jesus spoke to a group, he would always speak in several parables, and so like his message is all these parables, and there's slight differences between all those scenarios. So like, you know, you have so he does one, he goes you know, there's 100 sheep, and then there's one missing, then there's 10 coins and one missing, and then you get the prodigal son. So you have two sons or whatever, one son and one individual that's missing. And you know, so he takes you through that process. That's solving one problem of like, oh, okay, well, you can't just say because something is you know, good for the many that we, you know, that one out of 100, the fact that we have to sacrifice that person or whatever, like, no, that's not a sufficient justification. So he gets them to that point through a series of stories where if you explore any of those stories to like their logical conclusions or whatever, you know, they're limited. But by putting them together, you can get people to like actually expand their thinking. And then he goes into some other ones too after that, to really point out some of the hypocrisy of the Pharisees, that you know, they're more, it leads to, you can't serve both God and money.
You're saying that the
that's
parables only make sense like symphonically, sort of like
the main
each one is.
The point is that each one is kind of pushing your cognitive dissonance a little bit more to get you to break through some of your rigid presuppositions, I guess.
Yeah.
So, like each one is like basically a spot on the overall, let's say, map
Yeah.
that he's trying to lay out. But so like so stories and these different kinds of things are all kind of like well, even the question of you can't justify. What was your thing there, Ben, about justifying existence because of
Yeah, like the intuition
yes,
of exist, like your I assume son
right.
Is aware of his existence there. He's not even necessarily able to articulate it, but like
Okay,
he doesn't
so
have to
now
prove
that,
it. None of us
right.
feel like we have to prove that.
So
Yeah,
like, but what's interesting about you laying that out there, putting it out there, is it offers us a particular perspective, not a full perspective of the kind of man that you are, but a piece of perspective of something that you're interested in. And I think it's an interesting. I don't know. I'm just thinking about that as far as like, yeah, the map is never the territory, but also it's kind of like, well, like why do we have these different
So I mean, and I can give you,
perspectives?
there's other examples too. You know, like, well, for one thing, the whole idea of like you don't exist and you're just an illusion. Yeah, that's something that somebody has to like teach you. So you already you have to like go through one of those kind of cognitive dissonant moments before you can even end up there. Because nobody just thinks, oh, I just don't exist. Like, you don't just, I've known all my life I don't really exist. Like this, it doesn't make sense. You're right.
Well, but in a certain sense, what they're pushing back on there is the idea that like in other words, this little kid here doesn't really exist apart from his parents. Like he does, we're all in a network. Like, and maybe there are
her parents.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, okay. She doesn't realize her existence. Like in a sense, dad is like a god figure here, right? Like there's no thought about what it would be to not have dad there. It's just not even in the. It would be terrifying, right? It would be like mind breaking. Like what do I do? And so like maybe there's that intuition that we're not as independent as we think we are.
Well,
And
there's
there's
also some really interesting things where, like, there's this book here that we have. This book here, this book, Llama Llama Red Pajama by Anna Dewdney. This book is a very interesting experiment because since she was about 7 months old, I mean, we've been reading this to her forever, but since about 6 or 7 months old, she, like, you get to a certain point in this story and she's locked in. Like, and it's a really simple story. I don't know if you ever read it, but there's a lot of drama in this story. And once you get to a certain part, look at her. She's like, "Oh, you're gonna read this," and her face is like this, But like, you get to a certain part in this story, and she's in it, man. And then once it starts to kind of like the drama peaks out and it comes back down, and it's like, the mama's like, "Oh, it's okay." She doesn't care about that part of the story. She wants to go back and she wants to get into the drama. And what's interesting is she's been like that since like 7 months old. I can read this book to her right now and she'll be freaking out on how great this story is. Look, she's already turning back. She loves that. But like, that's, to me, like, we didn't teach her that. We don't even know how I don't even know how she knows this stuff, right? And so that to me is kind of like, maybe it's not proof that I exist, but man, it's proof of something that's ineffable.
Well, so I think, that's one the thing of like, yeah, the idea, maybe I don't exist. If that's like what's on your map, that's a terrible map for accomplishing almost everything. Just assuming that you exist is much better overall.
Can we say model and not map? I think it's more
sure.
accurate.
Yeah.
But maybe
Model.
if the drama means like, and I found this with little kids. I used to work in a daycare center, and I would get in trouble because I would read the Grimm's Brothers, which are quite dark stories. But if you want kids to be interested in something, it's like the Hansel and Gretel story. We tend to think like, oh, that's a nice little story. It's a terrifying story. It's saying like, don't trust adults. Your mother probably wants you dead. Your dad might throw you out of the house, and then you go see this candy house where there's a woman who's trying to eat you and kill you and put you in the oven. Like, it's very dark. But what it is like, I believe it's not related to the scriptures, but it's a way of adults telling kids like, you got to be careful. And like this idea of, and I always like to I used to teach theology, and I taught kids who grew up with Barney. The Barney, the modern thing is, here's a big purple dinosaur freak who's saying, "Love me. We all love each other. Trust everyone." And I was like, that is a terrible lesson, right? I mean, this is, and they hated it. They hated it. The kids who grew up with that. They all laughed when I said that. They're like, "Yeah, we hate Barney. He's a, PDF, obviously, or something like he is in some sense." This is a dangerous message. Trust adults, trust everyone implicitly, and we all love each other.
Yeah,
and we're all here to help each other. That is not actually, that doesn't map on in a sense to reality.
Crazy. Because that kind of ideology or thinking allows. There's like just down the street, there's a daycare center.
Yeah,
there's a chain of them around here, and you know what they're called? They're called Gingerbread House. You think I'm going to take my kid to a? No, and they fly the rainbow flag. Like, they fly the rainbow flag, which is fine, okay, but like, I don't know, it seems weird to me, right? Yeah. So at least they put right out in their advertisement of what they are. If you're willing to pay attention, like, do you really send your kids there? I don't know. It seems weird to me.
Call me weird, but 3-year-olds and rainbow flags, I don't think are a good mix. There, what? I said it.
So
3-year-olds and rainbow flags are not a good
mix. So this is one of the things I'll have the thing here. I'll just put it out. So the newer book that I've finished, but I haven't really put the public rollout on here. But one of the things that I talk about right in the beginning of it is that So yeah, you have the word. Everything you learn is a word, and then there's some embodied example of that word, essentially from parents is where it begins.
Bless you.
And it's this whole thing of like, people don't believe things for the reasons that they say they do. When they say like, I believe in science because I'm rational, that's an explanation for why they believe that comes after their actually like belief or their trust. So whether you believe in God or whether you don't believe in God, it's basically, and this is a thing, they've done studies and figured it out, people will believe whatever the credible people in their life believe. So if you have parents that are religious and they're faithful, you are almost certain to also end up being a faithful believer.
Do you know what's actually different? It's different than that, Michael. If you read, there's a Swiss study. It actually matters the parent. So actually, it's almost 100% the father that determines that. The mother is almost irrelevant, such that, like, I think, so here's how it goes. If the father is religious and the mother is religious, okay, is a certain, I'm not saying it's deterministic, but like generally speaking, comes out at an X. If the mother is not religious, it's about the same.
Yeah.
If the mother is religious and the father is not religious, almost none of them are religious. Okay, so it's weird. It's actually
it kind of goes in the same thing in a sense, because then you even just within the household, because you don't like, you have this thing of the kid being like, these two people don't believe the same thing. And so then always believing what the dad believes, that's an important, it's an important, interesting that is the tendency.
Yeah.
But either way, so it's like, you've got, so either way, if you want to say it, father, hopefully mom and dad are on the same page. That's always the best. That's always the least confusing for a kid. If they're faithful, the kid will be faithful. If they say they're religious and they're hypocrites, then they'll end up rejecting it. But also, it's interesting because you have people who are, you have people who say, like, I don't believe in God. And according to the presuppositionalist, they should live like a life of moral, degeneracy, but they don't. They're actually fine and upstanding citizens. And then the children notice that. And so then they say, why do I need to believe in God? Like, I've learned how to be a moral person or whatever, even though there is a sort of a disconnect, I think that there is a problem with, like, I could get into how exactly later.
I mean, I think in a way that the differentiation between father and mother is very biblical. If you think, like, God is presented as a father, not presented as a mother.
Yeah.
And there, like, obviously that's not because God has male genitals, but there is a way in which God's relation to us is masculine and not feminine. He is the creator. We receive him. So I do think there is that aspect to it, but it's weird because it also is a little bit of an insight into the admonitions in the New Testament for women not to preach, because women even if you have, let's say, two faithful Christians, but the mother is the primary sort of pusher of religion, it turns especially young men off to religion because it's sort of the wrong role. Even though she may be correct in what she's saying, that is the father's job to do. And when the mother does it, it fundamentally undermines it in a way that is rooted in nature, I think.
I heard somebody say that like women make children, and then men make men or adults, and like there's a particular like kind of role there, like chiseling. They're the sculptors of what the mother.
Jordan Peterson talks about is like essentially like you shouldn't even like a child and mother is like a one unit essentially up until a certain point, like or it's a process, but like the baby, so the baby doesn't even consider itself separate from the mother. But as soon as it does start to consider itself separate,
yeah,
how can it differentiate itself from its mother except by comparing itself to something other than the mother, which by necessity would be the father. So that's probably why, why the big thing is, because otherwise the baby doesn't even, get a personality.
I've thought about this a lot. My wife insists that a baby doesn't recognize it separate from the mother until it's like 6 months old. It still doesn't recognize it's outside of the womb or something like that. My wife insists on this.
I think that's
I don't
right.
know.
Something like it
But
is something like
at
that.
some point, the child recognizes it's part of a family, and then it recognizes it's, as it gets older, it's part of a village or a tribe, and then it gets a little older, and most people stop at village and tribe level, but it's possible to go up to country level. But to get to country level, you need a stepping stone, which is region, or in America, state. So the Americans that are most proud of their country are also very proud of their state. A good example is Texans. I'm Texan, I'm proud. But they're also really proud to be American. Okay? You need that stepping stone of like this regional place, which is above village or tribe, but below country.
But isn't there a dual aspect that if you really love your state, you also hate your state more than anyone else? Like, what the problems are, and do you know what I'm saying? It's not just positive; it's negative too, even in the family.
You're more invested, obviously.
Like I don't.
I'm not going to fight you on the details.
Well, I think it's important because, for example, I like when you say the 6-month thing. I'm not sure every mother has this problem, but a lot of times mothers, when they first breastfeed, there is a war between the baby and them about the milk. And the baby is going to win the war. And the baby does not care about the mother saying, I'm having trouble. And it can get brutal. And I think that goes with all of these things.
Personally.
What's that?
I didn't witness that personally.
Yeah, it's only in some cases. Yeah.
It's interesting because I had pulled this up to look at earlier, but breastfeeding is an interesting thing because whatever, this is long post on X or whatever, but basically
it's a bonding thing.
But it's also like it is literally like a means of communication, like because it's different for boys and girls. Like, women produce different milk for boys and girls, and then it changes as they grow. Like, basically it's like the mother's nipple is absorbing the baby's saliva and like getting chemical information from that, and then adjusting the mix accordingly. It's crazy. It's crazy. I was going to say it in the sense of like, it's funny because a lot of times you'll hear people, pastors and preachers and stuff, talk about that verse, like where Paul and Peter both say it about spiritual milk. Like, you're not ready for spiritual meat. You're still drinking spiritual milk, and people are like, oh, that's bad. We need to move on to the meat. And it's like, milk's amazing. Like, the fact that there's spiritual milk, to me, it means, I think it's the thing, where the Holy Spirit, the preacher says one thing, and everybody hears something slightly different in the church there, and that's the Holy Spirit kind of giving them the spiritual milk that they need.
There's also an interesting. I find an interesting thing. You if you heard these things, like, where does original sin come in? Where does it come in? And the early church saw it as coming in the pleasure of the sexual act, that pollutes the new human being, somewhat. I think there's an argument you can make that to be born of a woman is to be born into sin, because she has the Eve's nature and is much closer to the devil and the demonic, and has a sort of natural rebelliousness. And I'm not saying in every case, obviously, like there are variations, but that, this is I don't know if you ever heard of Jesse Lee Peterson. He has this kind of interesting family dynamic, sort of like,
it's amazing,
connected in some ways to Freudianism, but like he's saying that like every person has to kind of identify their mother as evil and forgive the mother in order to get to the next stage of life and return to the father, which does correspond loosely to, you know, the Christian message. It's sort of very specific, but
Yeah, you can go back to the beginning
I
of the
got
stream
so
if you
many
want.
things
It's
to say about that.
we talked about it because I don't think that's I don't think it's right. I don't think it's true that yeah. I just put this back up on the screen too. So this is the thing I started off with this can't make it bigger, but the from the this is what this LDS guy said. In the LDS church, we do not see Eve eating the forbidden fruit as a mistake or even a sin. To the contrary, we celebrate her courage and wisdom to partake of the fruit, transgress the bounds of Eden, and become all that her heavenly Father wanted her to be. Now, I said I don't think that that's I wouldn't put it that way. And somebody was talking about C.S. Lewis here and like, oh, but he's talking about C.S. Lewis making speculative fiction as like the reason why we should reject what the Mormon says. And the Mormons, this is the big problem. This kind of the whole thing that I had started off the stream, and I had made a video. I put out a video yesterday about was like evangelicals play with two different, very different sets of rules when it comes to like working with Catholics and working with Mormons, or like why they accept Catholics. Not all Catholics necessarily, but you know, they'll say, oh, well, there's a lot of really good Catholics who really love Jesus, but so like against the Mormons, and then all of a sudden it becomes about like doctrine. It's like you can ignore Catholic doctrine you don't agree with if they're good people, but for some reason you can't with Mormons, who are like most famously, and this is like the paradox, you know, because they're so famously nice, generous, caring, loving people, and it's a stumbling block. It's a thing that it's difficult to figure out. Like, and that is even to say, like, well,
but doctrinally, Mormons are much further away.
Oh yeah, for sure. But
than evangelicals.
But the thing is that the problem. This means doctrine does not necessarily determine how good of a Christian you are. Whether you want.
I think Mormons are crazy. I do think Mormonism is crazy, and I think they are crazy people. I think Charlie Kirk getting shot, it's not just a random thing. He was shot in Utah. I think they're crazy people.
They're
with a veneer of like.
Well,
niceness.
there's everything. You have any group you have that size, you have every type of person in there. Like that's the thing. You don't have.
Yeah, but I think at its roots, it is crazy.
Sure.
If you watch the Elizabeth
I don't know. I think
story,
in order to believe in God at all, you have to be out of your mind. So.
No, I don't disagree with you. I don't disagree with you. Like I'm not like I don't think the Book of Mormon was like a divine revelation or anything like that. I think Joseph Smith more or less probably made it up. But
what you just highlighted there, I'm not sure if it's true. Of Mormons generally, that is a complete inversion of the Genesis story. You're making Eve into Prometheus,
right? So
and like that is, if you go from there, you're going to be crazy all the way through.
Well, but the point. This is the point that what I think, and I'm saying is as an evangelical and mostly speaking towards my tribe, there's a great lack of awareness of like why did this spring up and succeed in the first place, and it's not because people just believe in crazy stuff. It was actually because there was a lot of hypocrisy in the established churches in the area. Like it had just become the same old song and dance. It wasn't really doing it for anything for people. So because they dropped the ball, and it's not just Mormons too, because there was like at the same time, like a million different sects all sprung up at the same time. So, it's
I don't think that's true. I think that the scriptures tell us that people have itching ears. They want to hear something new. There's always going to be like if you say like, oh well, I started a new sect, ripping apart the previous unity because there were people in my group that weren't perfect. Okay, well, when's that not going to be true?
Can I ask you guys a question?
No.
Because the thought popped into my head recently, and I'm like, I wonder what Christians think about this. So this whole idea of Eve eating the apple, is that a euphemism for them laying together?
Knowledge is biblically used both to mean knowing and physical knowing. So I do think it would involve, because there is also like they were naked and unashamed and then they wanted to cover themselves. So I do think that it's a symbol for experiencing sin and therefore knowing. Do you know what I mean? The alienation that comes with it. So the alienation
That's a very
she experiences.
Freudian.
No, it's right in the Bible. What is
No,
the
I
first
know,
thing
but
she
no,
feels?
the take on knowing as sex as knowing is like a
No. That's in the Hebrew. The word to know. He knew her
yes.
means he had sexual relations with her. The word though is know, not. They had other words for that, but they.
So it's
There's
not
a-
a crazy thought.
It definitely had a sexual dimension. Because the consequence of the eating is the alienation. First she's at war. The war of the sexes begins. She blames Adam. Then there's an alienation from the body. I want to cover myself up. Then there is an alienation from God too, trying to manipulate God into saying like it's really his fault, right? So that's true of women today who indulge sexually. It's definitely one of the core problems. Eve was a hoe, and the snake also
Question.
is vaguely penile, obviously, right? I mean, like no one's going to say that's not true. So
I mean, you can. It's not. I don't think that it's. It doesn't really matter in that sense. Like it's showing that there's an analogous relationship between anything of if you have a command not to transgress this one rule and you do it, and then the consequences that come from it. Because okay, so let me go back to the whole thing of the map of the territory or whatever. Like, let's say, or you, as a parent, you have a plan for your child's life. Your plan for them is not to become a drug addict, not to become a hooker. Like, that's a good plan to have. Then you have to figure out how are you going to go through it. You could do it by trying to create a relationship of inherent trust where you first let them do, and this is this is what some people do this. You're gonna give your child a little marshmallow and say don't eat the marshmallow, and then if they do eat the marshmallow, you slap their hand or whatever. So you're teaching them whatever, essentially to obey through that
Delayed gratification.
And you're doing it through the means.
that sounds like child abuse, by the way.
Yes, it is. Well, the thing is, it is because it actually backfires.
Why would you put a marshmallow in front of them and then slap them for?
Well, that's what's her name, Ayla. That's her story. She had super fundamentalist parents who basically tried to force her life to go into this certain way.
I don't know who you're referring to.
Ayla?
Ayla?
She's Ayla. She's a hooker or whatever that's on Twitter all the time. And she's been interviewed by a bunch of people. She does all this statistics stuff. I guess you could say that or whatever. But she's but that's her dad's a Christian apologist, and then essentially she said, comes to the point of if my parents were were being lying and manipulative about all this little stuff to get us to like behave as kids, while they must have been lying about everything. And then she just, goes off the deep. So it's like, that's the thing is you can't escape the thing of, you have to actually live with integrity if you want people to trust you and believe you. If you don't, they won't. They'll just reject it. So
Yeah, there is a very tight correlation between a certain type of fundamentalist upbringing and both atheism and, I would call it, hoe behavior in women. Even though you'd think it would be, it's a high correlation. It's not an inverse correlation. The more you don't allow your child to experience life because you're going to impose something on, let's say, her, the more she's going to rebel against that. And she's right to, even though.
Do you know your child listening right now? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm always berated on the internet because I don't see myself as a Christian. I don't see myself as having anything to say about my daughter's sexuality. She's free to do whatever she wants. She's 23 years old. I'm not the shepherd of her adult sexual behavior in any way.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable.
And
what would the other option be? What are you gonna do?
Well, you have these guys who want me to give you your hand to them in marriage. I'm like, that's not how our culture works. So.
Who is that up there? I can't see anything.
My daughter, Grace, is here.
Ben's daughter, yes.
Oh, hello.
My name's
I
Grace.
my
got
daughter.
this phrase that I tell my
Hey, yo,
children,
yes, I
and
wanted to
learned
say hi
from
to
my
her.
father, who said it to me. He said, "You can swear in the playground, but you do not swear in the house."
Right.
And it's like, you can't stop me swearing in the playground.
What's
What
your
you're
point?
saying? You agree with him on that?
With my father,
Yeah.
yeah. He couldn't stop. I can't stop my children swearing in the playground, but they don't swear in the house. Okay, that's the rule.
Yeah. Which is also just saying, like, reality is. Because
Yeah.
you can't do it anyways, right? So
Yeah.
it might seem like a rule, but he's only making one rule, which is about his house, which I think is fair.
Yeah, I didn't argue with him. My children don't argue with me, but what happens in the playground, I have no control over that.
Yeah. Do you want to have control over it?
No,
Yeah, because they have,
no, I want them
they're
to
not,
explore.
right? Like, you don't want to overparent. And I think we need to make parenting fun again, but it has become like terrifying to be a parent, which you could see in the West. People don't parent. They just don't want to do it because they're held to such a high standard. They're criticized for everything they do. Right now, this guy with his daughter here, like, there's tons of people on the internet who would say, "Oh, that's child abuse. Look, you shouldn't allow people to look at your daughter.
Don't put her on camera. Don't
right?
you know
I
there
mean,
are
it's
weirdos out there?
crazy. Yeah, there are people who are
Legit.
going to be whatever. Okay, so who cares? At a certain point, it would be appropriate, but at a very young age, and once a person's an adult, they're free.
Well, I wouldn't make it a common practice. I wouldn't.
I think
do
it's
it.
beautiful. Like, your daughter.
I wouldn't do it all the time, but like I know,
loving
like
it.
Michael, I know Mark, I know, and I know the folks. Most of the folks are gonna be watching this, and it's like, but I wouldn't do this as like, I wouldn't set up a live stream where you can pay me while I'm sitting here playing with my daughter. Like, that to me is unethical for me to engage in, but like, I know that my friends here who are watching, they want to see some progress, and I think the camera's probably far enough away where you don't really see everything about
But
her.
so you are paranoid. It's fine. She's just a baby. What's the worst that could
Well,
happen?
it's also, I didn't ask her mother. I didn't ask.
Uh-oh.
So
Uh-oh.
it's my wife. I didn't ask my wife if this was okay, even though I know she'd probably say, probably don't do it again. She probably might have a lot of similar reasons for, because
Women are more paranoid than men. So.
yeah, I will
Here's
yeah. But so yeah.
here's the thing. Nobody comes into parenthood with experience. And so we all stumble through it and make whatever mistakes in our own individual ways. We mess up our kids in our own unique ways, and
Plus, people's
generally
like
it works out okay, but it's a messy job.
people's opinions about what other parents are doing is interesting. Like, so we go to church, and if you were to judge what the relationship between my wife and our daughter is based on what we look like at church, you would probably not be able to get a good picture, because at church, Carolyn here will not be with Anne. She just wants to be with me the whole time. And it's crazy, because you're like, well, why doesn't she want to be with her mother? Well, she's also with her mother like all day, almost every day.
Plus,
So
church is all about daddy energy, isn't it? Aren't we just
I love
all
it.
worshiping the father? So, like, she may be just intuitively saying, like, this is a daddy space.
Yeah, it's funny. It is. It's so cool though. But
I used to
like-
cry when my dad would go up for communion, and I would have to stay back. He's such a little drama queen.
I love
That's so
getting
sweet.
to take her up when we do communion. I could take her up and she gets the blessing or whatever, and that will make me cry. Oftentimes I like when I'm not expecting it, and I don't really know why, other than this is such an amazing experience. I'm an old dad. I'm 42. Her birthday's in 19 days, her first birthday, and so all of this it's scary
Wow,
and new,
congratulations.
but yeah, it's awesome. And I'm pro parent, man.
It is
Go out there,
awesome.
have babies, everybody. Go have babies. Like, just do it and be responsible for your family. It's incredible.
But in some ways, Chad, is this your first kid? I don't.
This
if you
is
don't want to say.
yep. Yeah,
You're too old for this.
I know that.
Like,
That's
this is
terrifying.
brutal.
Nuh-uh.
This is also
I agree, Mark. Like, it can be, but like, you're not in the ideal, optimal.
no.
like, stage of your
I'm
life
actually I'm at the age of historical grandfather.
Yeah, right.
And like, so I think about this all the time, actually, because death is constantly on my mind, like all the
Chad.
time. And
What?
well, no,
Because of your
just
weight?
42.
no. Just think about like not in like I'm not terrified of it, but it's constantly present. So death is constantly a character that's in the room all the time. Like, I'm like, I don't know, man. Like, I want to be a father that's around. Yes, I'm overweight. Thanks for calling me out and fat shaming me on.
I was just wondering. There's no
Online.
other
Chad,
reason I
you're
can think
overweight.
of.
No, it's that I can be hit by a bus tomorrow. Like, anything could happen. And so I didn't have those kinds of thoughts before as present as I do now that I'm a father.
Oh, you're saying your life matters to you more because you know you're needed by someone.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, and it's
Okay, unpopular
it's
opinion.
constantly there. And like, I'm not like terrified of it. I've accepted that obviously I'm going to die. I mean, I don't have death amnesia. I know it's going to happen. But I want her to be
Unpopular
able to,
opinion.
I want her to be able. Well, first of all, I like living. Like, I really love all the attributes that life has to offer. Like, I love spaghetti.
Can see
That's
that.
something I bring up. Like, these are one of the.
Yo.
These are
You're a
one of
pasta
the. No, but what I'm trying to point out is there are things that that I think that are very powerful that life has to offer that we often just kind of overlook. And so, yeah, That's what I'm kind of pointing out. But yeah, sorry, I should probably get off here now.
Yeah, I'm gonna shut it down in a few minutes.
Yeah.
So if anybody wants to, we'll just go
Just
around the circle and have
unpopular
your
opinion.
last thoughts.
I didn't
I
really
think we
care
bummed
about
Chad out.
the future until I got married and had children, and then so I get where Chad is with this. It's like suddenly the future is important when you have children. On the same vein, because of this, I think only fathers should be allowed to vote. Unpopular opinion, but I'm right on this. It's
I actually
because
think in a
fathers
way-
really care about.
I think in a way, if you're a father, you should feel more like chill about dying because in a sense you're living on now. Do you know what I mean? You could make the argument, okay, I've created something that's going to last beyond me, so I'm ready to go.
Mine are almost teenagers, whereas yours, you said they're in the 20s, so maybe that's the difference.
Mine run from 14 to 23 at this point.
Yeah, but for me, it's like once they get above a certain age, I'm like, okay, I've done my job.
Yeah,
I can step back.
yeah. That's great. My daughter has been making the claim that she's 6 years old for 8 years now, and I keep telling her, "You're an adult. I don't know what to tell you."
I'm also 6-year-old, but I'm also 16 and 26 and 36
Right.
and 46, and I'll be 56 soon, hopefully.
Cool. Any other last words?
Thank you very much for having us on, Michael. Hope
Yeah.
to see you another time. I like that
It's
guy.
fun.
Is he going to come on again? How do you know him personally?
So
Daniel?
Chad?
he's Daniel OG Rose.
No, yeah, all the guys.
Yeah.
There was
Yeah,
a guy though. He was talking about language and
Yeah, so
philosophy
that's
and stuff.
Daniel. Him and his wife, they like write together, and their writing name is OG Rose. That's their
Oh.
YouTube. Here, I get their link pulled up. So
Yeah, we should
Uh,
definitely
He's
subscribe.
intense. He needs to slow it down a bit.
yes, he does
I can't
talk
keep up.
quickly.
But that's good though. It's fun. Personalities are always interesting. Personality is always
Yeah.
I'll put this. So yeah. So Daniel has been reading my book that I wrote, and we were making arrangements. So sometime in the next few weeks, he's going to have me on his channel or whatever, and we're going to talk about that and talk about some of the. I've been reading his books, so they have a lot of books that they've written and a lot of videos and a lot of cool stuff. So
You got to find a way to get like viewership though,
yeah.
or you don't
Yeah.
care.
I mean, I don't. Well, actually, him and his wife just put out this one the other day. Is marketing bad? And it was a good discussion about that thought of like, people not wanting to like compromise their values or whatever, but how do you get the word out? So,
Right. Right.
it was a good talk. So that's something that would be worth checking.
Check
out. So
Well, thank you very much for your time.
yeah, thanks for
Yeah,
coming.
nice
on.
to see you guys again. Bye.
Good to see you. Have a
Cheers,
good one.
folks.
Bye, Mark.
Bye-bye.
Bye.